You know, water damage, it's one of those things you just hope never, ever happens to you. It's chaotic, it's sudden, and it can turn your entire world completely upside down in an instant. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on what really happens when water goes where it shouldn't and how the pros manage to bring order back from that chaos.
And it's almost never some big dramatic explosion. More often, it's just a sound you can't quite place. You know, a pipe bursts behind a wall, or a water heater finally gives out in the middle of the night. You hear that sudden rush of water, and then just a deeply unsettling quiet. And that's the moment of discovery, right before the panic really sets in.
And this is where the clock starts ticking. I mean it. From the moment that water gets in, you are in a flat-out race against time. The first 24 to 48 hours are absolutely critical. That is the window where you can prevent a simple water problem from turning into a devastating, mold-infested structural nightmare. Now, you might think a leak is just a case of bad luck, but a lot of the time, it's actually a disaster that's just been waiting to happen. The environment, the age of your home, even the very ground it's built on, can create a perfect storm for water damage. Let's take Farmers Branch, Texas as a quick case study. The soil there? It's expansive clay, which means it swells and shrinks, and that cracks foundations. A lot of the homes were built in the 60s and 70s, with galvanized pipes that are now starting to fail. You add in some poor lot drainage and the intense storms you get in North Texas, and you have a recipe for disaster. See? This isn't just random chance. It's a collision of all these local factors.
So when a professional shows up, they don't just see a wet mess. They see a puzzle that needs to be solved. And they have a very specific framework they use to classify the chaos. This, right here, is what separates a real restoration pro from, just some guy with a shop vac. And that framework comes from the IICRC. Just think of them as the governing body that basically writes the official rulebook for the restoration industry. And here's a big tip. If a company tells you they aren't IICRC certified, that is a major red flag. That certification means they've been trained to handle water damage according to proven scientific standards.
And the very first thing they assess is the water itself, because not all water is created equal. You've got Category 1, or clean water, say from a supply line. It's not a huge health risk at first, but then you have Category 3, or black water. This is the nasty stuff from a sewage backup or a flood, and it is grossly contaminated. The source of the water dictates everything, from the safety gear they need to whether your drywall and carpet can actually be saved or if it all has to be torn out.
But it's not just about the type of water. They also classify the extent of the damage. A Class 1 might be a small leak just on a concrete floor. But a Class 3? That means water is coming down from the ceiling, saturating insulation, the subfloor, the whole structure below. This distinction is so critical because it tells the pros exactly how much drying power they're going to need to bring in.
Okay, so once the problem is properly classified, the pros can execute their playbook. And it is a methodical, step-by-step process designed to bring a home from a state of total emergency back to normal.
This playbook really has 4 main phases. It always starts with assessment. They have to find the source and document just how far that water has traveled. Then comes extraction, getting all the standing water out and fast. The most crucial phase is next, drying. This is where they pull all that hidden moisture out of the building materials themselves. And finally, restoration, which is exactly what it sounds like, brings everything back to the way it was before. And this gets to the absolute core principle of professional drying. The idea of something feeling dry is the enemy. Just because a surface feels dry to the touch doesn't mean the wood stud right behind it isn't completely saturated. Guesswork leads to mold, rot, and way bigger problems down the line. It has to be a data-driven process, period.
Yeah, and this is exactly why you can't just open some windows and throw a few towels down. Professional drying is a science, and believe me, it requires some seriously advanced technology.
The real fight here isn't against the puddle you can see on the floor. It's against the moisture that has wicked its way up inside your walls, soaked into your subfloor, and is now hiding out in the insulation. That is the moisture that will absolutely destroy your home if it's left behind. So how do they find it? Well, they use tools like thermal imaging cameras to actually see temperature changes that show them exactly where the wet spots are behind walls. They use moisture meters that can literally measure the amount of water deep inside a piece of wood. And they don't just use fans. We're talking massive dehumidifiers that pull huge amounts of moisture from the air and special air scrubbers to capture any nasty contaminants like mold spores. Ultimately, this all comes down to a science called psychrometrics. It's really the study of how air, temperature, and humidity all work together. The pros are basically manipulating these 3 things to convince the wet building materials to release their moisture into the air
where all that equipment can then capture it and remove it. It's a very controlled process.
And a process like that, it takes time. A realistic timeline for most structural drying jobs is somewhere between 3 and 7 days. So if anyone promises you they'll be done in 24 hours, well, they're either dealing with a tiny spill or they are not drying your home properly. Rushing the process is the #1 cause of mold after a water loss.
So if this ever happens to you, probably the most important decision you're going to make is who to call. That very first phone call really sets the entire tone for your recovery.
And here's the challenge. In a lot of places, like Texas, the water damage industry is pretty much unregulated. That means literally anyone with a van can call themselves a restoration expert. So in that moment of panic, how do you separate the real pros from the pretenders?
Well, the best way to protect yourself is with a simple checklist. When you call, you ask them these questions. Are you IICRC certified? Do you have a 24/7 emergency response time, ideally under 60 minutes? Do you use the industry standard software like Estimate for your estimates? Will you talk directly to my insurance adjuster for me? And, maybe most importantly, will you use moisture meters and thermal imaging to prove to me that the job is truly done? If you get a no or even just hesitation on any of these, that's your sign to keep looking.
And that brings us to the final thought. After seeing all of this, it becomes pretty clear that a home isn't just a structure, it's a complex system with plumbing, drainage, and all sorts of building materials. So the real question isn't just how you'll react to a disaster, but whether you understand your own home's vulnerabilities right now. What is its weakest link?